This is the Tony Chachere postgame show. Bob Fossella along with Shahan Jeyarajah of Diehards.com, the Big 12 reporter, Mike Craven of Hook'em.com, and man, what was going through Sam Ehlinger's mind? All he has to do is throw that ball away. They kick the field goal. We're going to a second overtime, but I guess that is what you call a freshman mistake. Mike, want to get your initial thoughts on the game, and I'm not sure, it's another one of these quote-unquote moral victories, but I'm not sure what Tom Herman says to his team in the locker room now.
That one probably hurts more than the USC overtime loss and even the Oklahoma one last week, because this one felt like a game Texas could actually win as opposed to just stay in. The defense played tremendous today. I think Todd Orlando and his staff deserve a lot of credit. Oklahoma State's offense is the best in the nation and puts up a lot of points for a reason. They kept Texas in that ball game all day, and you just needed your quarterback to go and make one play, and instead he made a mistake, and that was the difference in the ball game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And look, when you have such a young quarterback, sometimes that's the game, right? Sometimes he's going to make a dumb mistake down the stretch. Sometimes he's going to, throw the ball away when he shouldn't. Sometimes he's not going to take the easy yardage because as a freshman, you come in and everybody wants to make that superstar play, wants to throw that game-winning touchdown pass. And this was a situation where you just needed him to, again, throw the ball away, go down even, and Josh Rowland can go and kick a field goal. And eventually it costs you. But, I think, yes, it was a great effort by the defense. Again, they hold them to just, to 428 yards. But, when you account for the amount of plays that they run and how many yards they usually have, it was a great defensive effort. And really, after that first couple of drives, after the fumble, really, Oklahoma State only had one big play, and it was that one where Brandon Jones falls down, Marcel Aitman goes and gets the ball, and other than that, Texas kept them completely under clamp. So I think overall, it was a great defensive performance, and again, you just hate that it had to end that way.
You do indeed. This is the Tony Chachere postgame show. If you're in search of inspiration for your next tailgate, or maybe you just want to spice up weeknight dinner around the table, look no further than Tony Chachere's famous original Creole seasoning in the little green can. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. Now, we want to get to your comments, and they are pouring in. Slamming Tim Beck. What was going on with that last play? We'll be lucky to finish 6-6. Tim Beck is a joke, and I understand where Tim Beck is coming from. I'm probably the only person, but you got no offensive line. However, it seems like somewhere during the course of the game you get creative. What was Sam Ehlinger thinking in that last play? We'll get to that in just a minute, but let's start out with something positive. We got to talk about this defensive effort, because if you tell me Texas is going to hold Oklahoma State to 13 points, there's no doubt this is a victory. The defense was amazing. Mike, it looked like they switched it up to a too deep man-to-man sort of coverage underneath, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, they gave Chris Boyd help over the top on his side. Holden Hill played an excellent game against James Washington. That probably moved his draft stock up and put him on some recruiting boards there. But he played really well. And then the linebackers with Gary Johnson and Malik Jefferson on the field at the same time, that gives Texas a lot of speed at the linebacker position. And the defensive lineman, specifically Chris Nelson, played really good up front, and that allowed those guys to go play free. Mike Gundy's play calling was also interesting. It felt like Texas's offense coordinator was calling plays for both sides. It was nice. It just felt like a weird game, and it was just who was going to make the biggest mistake. Brandon Jones had an interception chance at the end of the game there that he dropped that could have set him up for field goal position. Oklahoma State didn't drop their interception return or interception at the end there. So it was a defensive battle both ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think that there are a lot of similarities between what Texas did and what TCU was able to do a few weeks ago to have some success against Oklahoma State. What they were really able to do was they dropped a lot back into coverage, like we were talking about. They dropped 2-3 deep sometimes, gave Chris Boyd help over the top. And again, Holden Hill, tremendous game. One of the best games that I've ever seen against James Washington, because, look, let's be real, James Washington is perhaps the best wide receiver in the entire country. He's a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Texas comes in here. They hold him to, 32 total yards on 4 catches. That's tremendous, in my opinion. And what they were also able to do really well, and offensive line injuries for Oklahoma State helped them a little bit, but they were able to come in and they were able to cause havoc with just their front seven. They didn't necessarily rely too much on blitzing too much, and I think that that's ultimately a good thing, and that's why they were able to have some success, because they were able to keep dropping those players back into coverage, but also get some pressure with their front seven.
One of the things that Texas did that I thought was interesting in this game, they had most of the game only 5 and 6 players in the box. They dared Oklahoma State to run the football on first, second, and even third down, and Mike Gundy just wasn't taking the bait. Mike, I got to give a lot of credit to the Texas run defense as well, because they did exactly what the game plan called for, and Mike Gundy, like you said, it was kind of a weird sort of play calling game on his end.
Yeah, if you take away the big plays from Oklahoma State's offense, historically they don't play very well. And Texas was going to make them beat them 5-6 yards at a time and hope Oklahoma State would get impatient. And that's exactly what happened. And then if you play solid fundamental defense when you're tackling, which is something Texas hasn't seen in a few years, but when you see open field tackling by the linebackers and P.J. Locke at the nickel position, and you can stop those for 5 or 6 downs, you live to play another down. And then, like you mentioned, Brecken Hager and some of those defensive linemen getting real pressure on the quarterback. It finally felt like Texas had the right personnel on the field and found a groove defensively. And that is the bright spot for this game, even though the way it ended is going to be painful.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that Texas did a great job playing against that running game, because Justice Hill, one of the best running backs in the entire Big 12, along with Justin Crawford, some other guys, you hold Oklahoma's running game, taking away sacks to 3.3 yards per carry. Hill is right there around 3.5 yards per carry. It wasn't a very successful game, and while Texas was dropping players back and making Oklahoma State run it, the defensive line and linebackers did a tremendous job of swarming to the ball, and even, again, there were a couple breakaway opportunities where, where Hill would go and run for a first down or something like that, but generally speaking, Oklahoma State wasn't that successful running the ball, even though Texas was going up, 5-6 in the box. And I think, again, that's just a testament to the linebacker play and to the defensive line play.
Well, we want to get your comments, and everyone wants to talk about the play calling outside of the great defensive play. Matt Boddicker says defense played lights out. Offense has to find an identity. Seemed they had the screen game going. Why do you go away from it? Joshua Lott says Becky, talking about Tim Beck, needs to go. Worst play calling ever. First down around the 10. All you need is 3. Yes, you want to score the TD, but protect the ball. 3 running plays and see what happens, then kick the field goal. I kind of disagree with that. You got to go for the win at that point in time. And quite frankly, in the overtime, I'm not sure what Sam Ehlinger was doing on third down. The same thing happened at the end of the Oklahoma game. It was 4th down. He needed to make something happen. He saw the flag go down, and he just threw it away. And same thing today. It looked like he literally, Mike, just threw it away, just, for lack of a better word, just spaced out.
Yeah, the overtime play calling can't be put on Tim Beck. I thought he called a good play there for the pass that got the pass interference to set him up for 1st and goal. When it's 3rd and goal from the 3-yard line, you got to go try to win the game, and all Sam's got to do is throw that out of bounds. You kick a field goal. And we're not talking about that play in particular. That was just, like you said, maybe a space moment. Maybe he thought it was 4th down. I mean, who kind of knows there? Maybe a receiver fell down that we didn't see on the screen or something. Who knows there? I do think both can be true, though. That particular play wasn't on Tim Beck, but the game was. And the play calling in the Oklahoma State game there left a lot to be desired. And it felt like the Texas offense was hoping and praying that the defense, special teams would create points or create field position for them, and it just frankly didn't happen. Oklahoma State played conservative as well, and it felt like Oklahoma State knew that 14 points would win this football game, and they ended up being right.
And then we got a comment from Jordale. Tim Beck has to go. From Elias, I can see why Ohio State was glad to see Beck go. He's a terrible play caller.
Well, I think that we're being a little bit unfair to Tim Beck.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, look.
You think we're acting on emotion?
Right. I mean, and I understand that it's happened a couple times this year, but look at the talent that Texas is throwing out onto the field, especially on the offensive line. If you can't run the football consistently because of your offensive line play, what do you want him to do? He can't block for you. He can't run for you. He can't run routes for you. And again, there are a couple plays too where Sam Ehlinger, incredible player, but he is a little bit of a gamer. He's still learning the playbook. He's still learning what exactly Tim Beck wants him to do. Again, I just feel like putting this all on Tim Beck that Texas can't, always run their offense effectively is a little unfair because, look, look at the personnel you have in front of you. You don't have one thing that you know you can do every single possession, and that's something that hurts. You don't have D'Onta Foreman to go get you 4 or 5 yards on a given play. You don't have a deep threat that you really trust consistently. Colin Johnson has been that at times, but he hasn't necessarily been that consistently. And so what do you want him to do, I guess, is my big question, because Ehlinger is going out there, and again, I do like what they were doing with the screen pass game, but I think that Oklahoma State was also starting to figure it out. I think you have to mix it up too. So again, I know it's hot and sexy and all to make fun of Tim Beck, but when you don't have the personnel necessarily to match up against a pretty good and underrated, in my opinion, Oklahoma State defense, there's just not that many options.
Well, here's what I'm going to say about Tim Beck. I'm not going to defend him too much, but I will say you're down 3 offensive linemen. You can't establish a run game as well. Sam Ehlinger, one of the things they said to him all week, Tom Herman definitely stressed this in his press conferences, we want him to hold the ball a little bit longer and let plays develop. And Mike, I almost think that backfired on Texas because it took away his instinct to run, and he had no running lanes today at all. And I'm not sure if he wouldn't have just pulled the ball down earlier on some of those pass plays that he might have found more yardage on the ground.
Yeah, there was a couple times where he probably could have escaped the pocket, maybe made something happen. But you go back and watch that Oklahoma tape, and there was a lot of times where he scrambled from a pocket that was clean. And that's just growing and being a quarterback and understanding the situation. Sure, when you kind of get PTSD a little bit, really, as a quarterback. You see it so often in your face that you start to imagine that it's there. And he was leaving the pocket a lot, and that gets you off schedule, and the wide receivers at Texas, frankly, aren't good enough to go get open and get separation on their own, and that makes it tough too. So I do agree that Tim Beck is getting too much blame when you have that many offensive line injuries, when you have running back deficiencies, when you're true freshman's probably your best running back, you have true freshman tight end, true freshman quarterback, inconsistency at wide receiver. There is not a lot that you can do, but one of the things that you can't do is run Chris Warren east and west on 3rd and 2.
Absolutely.
And those kind of simple things that you see as just a fan that you're just like, man, I mean, come on, what kind of play call is that? And I think that's what frustrates the Texas fans, are those occasional calls where it just doesn't feel right.
Well, we've kind of lost your audio there, Mike. We'll work on that. But Ralph Chavez says, how much longer are they going to suffer with this freshman quarterback? Get Buechele back in there to salvage the season so maybe we can get to a bowl. And Shehan, at this point in time, I don't think there's any change in quarterback that's going to happen for this team.
No, I mean, that's madness. I mean, look at what Sam Ehlinger is doing out there. I mean, Texas wouldn't be in these games if not for Sam Ehlinger. We had Shane Buechele out there, and I've been a Shane Buechele defender in many cases, but the offense clearly just runs much better with Ehlinger out there, with his dual threat ability, with his ability to move the football. And look at that Kansas State game, right? That Kansas State game was ugly. It was really, really ugly. And that was with Buechele under center. And I think that with Ehlinger, the offense has moved a little bit better. And again, I think that we are underrating to an extent this Oklahoma State defense. They have some great playmakers, especially on the defensive line. Darian Daniels, DeQuinton Osborne. These are some good players. And I know that the sort of instant reaction is to criticize the quarterback because this is football and we criticize quarterbacks. But Ehlinger played all right. Again, he made some terrible decisions down the stretch, but come on, let's not talk about this.
Yeah, Mike, we're not going to see a quarterback change. I'm sure Herman, well, I'm not sure about anything at this point in time, but no. In your mind, yeah, I mean, he's not going to make that change. Sam Ehlinger made yeah.
With offensive line troubles, those become even more to light if you put a stationary quarterback like Shane Buechele back there. If Shane Buechele's there, then that offensive line looks even worse. You can't use the running game and use the quarterback off of it. So that running game becomes even tougher. Maybe some of the slants, little quick throwing game stuff works a little bit better with Buechele there, but that would be a diminishing returns on what you would get from Buechele compared to Sam Ehlinger and what he allows this offense to do off script. But, I think what fans get with Texas and what's tough is when you're at Texas and you only allow 10 points, you're used to your team winning. And so when a defensive effort like that is put forth and you hold the 10th ranked team in the nation to 10 points, I think Texas fans are, rightly concerned about not being able to put up more than that with the amount of recruiting and stuff that's done at the University of Texas.
Well, Mike Garza says we should be 6-1 or 7-0, and Mike, I'll say shoulda, woulda, coulda, didn't. You are what you are. Your record is 3-4. That's what you are. Nice comment from Colin Aramil, who says the offensive line is terrible, but the coordinator, Shahan, has to adjust. And I agree to that. You know your line is terrible. You're really going to have to get creative as an offensive coordinator, and I will agree with the most of the Texas Nation on this. I don't think we have seen Tim Beck get creative enough with this offense.
Yeah, and I think that I think he's still trying to figure out his personnel too, because like you said, why are you running something east-west with Chris Warren of all people? You know, get Tonio Carter in there. He's somebody who can do that. Get Gerard Hurd. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Overall, though, I think that he's doing a good job when it comes to that screen passing game. I think that that's been a great sort of replacement for the run game in stretches. And I just think that sometimes the receivers weren't making those plays when they were available. And yeah, I think that definitely maybe you can try a couple more things when it comes to being creative on offense. But again, it's just tough with the personnel. And I know that when it comes to offensive line, again, what you try to do is you try to spread out the defense a little bit more. You try to, you know, mix up the run game, kind of get it outside. You know, obviously something like a sweep like what Warren ran isn't necessarily the worst idea. It's just you got to pick the right guys to do it. And I don't think he's doing that very well right now.
Well, you mentioned the receivers have to step up and make plays. Little Jordan Humphrey had one catch. Reggie Hemphill-Mapps went out early in the third quarter with a knee injury. He didn't come back. Big drop by Dorian Leonard. We had another big drop by the freshman. Cade Brewer had a chance to make a first down. Leonard as well. It was a third down play. Could have extended a drive. Didn't happen. The receivers, Mike, as talented as these guys are, and I think all of us agreed at the start of the season, this was the strongest group as far as positions go, was receivers. These guys have not stepped up to the extent that we expected.
Add Colin Johnson to the list of guys with drops there in the fourth quarter on a drive. I mean, it's not a personnel thing. I mean, they're not good. That's as simple as it can be put right now. Is when things break down and the wide receivers need to get open one-on-one. I mean, you just have to go make plays, just like a running back, just like an offensive lineman and a quarterback. The wide receiver is the same. When you get man-to-man coverage, you need to go make a play. And there aren't many times where you watch the film or you see a throw and Ellinger's just missing a guy wide open or something like that. These are tight windows and tight throws to the sideline and over the middle with blanket coverage, and some of that is not threatening with the run game, so the team can outnumber Texas in coverage. Some of that is a part of it, but the wide receivers do need to go make plays and get open and make better attempts to get open once the play is broken down and Ellinger is outside the pocket.
All right, let's say this offense doesn't change dramatically the rest of the season, and Mark J. Foster chimes in. Dag nabbit. Yeah, Mark, I'm with you on that, but let's say this offense doesn't change a whole lot, Shahan. Is Tim Beck at the end of the season, certainly it's not going to happen during the season, is he in danger of potentially losing his job?
Well, I think that you have to look at one thing. This is Tom Herman's offense. You know, Tom Herman is an offensive guy who was brought here to make offensive changes and to bring his offense to Texas. You know, he was an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. So when we start talking about Tim Beck, what we also have to realize is that this is Tom Herman's specialty too. So if we don't think that Tom Herman is involved with a lot of these decisions, now obviously play calling is the one area where obviously Tim Beck is going to be, you know, the most active. But when it comes to the overall identity of the offense, this is Tom Herman's offense. You know, he was brought here to do this. And again, I think that this is a very young team. I think that when we talk about these receivers, obviously Gerard Hurd, not a guy who's played wide receiver a lot. Colin Johnson, a sophomore. You know, Hemphill-Mapps, a freshman. A lot of guys out there who are very young. I think that we haven't given necessarily Beck a full slate to be able to use this, you know, because he has been here for 7 games. I mean, I know that everybody wants these instant results, and offensively there was a little bit more success last year at times. But I think that you need to at least let Beck see it through, especially because, again, this is Tom Herman's offense. This is what he was brought in here to do. What's happening out here, at least on a macro level, is what Tom Herman is doing. And so I just think that trying to blame Beck for all of it, it just seems a little bit unfair to me.
All right, same question, Mike. At the end of the season, things don't get a whole lot better. Is Tim Beck, is his job in jeopardy? Is he the scapegoat?
I don't think so. I mean, he started 4 true freshmen, one of them at quarterback, you know, one of them at right tackle. I mean, it's just hard. I mean, it's not, like I say all day, it's not Madden. You don't just plug these guys in and then they just play up to their player rating or something like that. They're human beings that don't get a lot of snaps. And you got a former walk-on at right guard. You have a true freshman at right tackle. You don't have an answer at running back. The wide receivers aren't getting open. I mean, there's not a playbook for that. And so this offseason, some things need to get addressed. The offensive line needs to get healthy, and the offensive line needs to get better. And they need to identify some playmakers on offense before we can really start judging Tim Beck on what he is and what he isn't as an offense coordinator.
Well, Kenneth Ray Trinidad says you can blame the coaches all you want, but the players have to make plays. They had plenty of opportunities to win, just didn't make the plays. And with that said, first half they needed to make a play. John Burt of all people, Mr. Drop himself last year, John Burt steps up and makes the play. I don't know if he was out of bounds or not, but he made the play. Texas gets its only touchdown on the Ehlinger plunge after that. This is the Tony Chachere postgame show. If you're in search of inspiration for your next tailgate, or maybe you just want to spice up weeknight dinner around the table, look no further than Tony Chachere's famous original Creole seasoning in the little green can. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. Mike Craven, Hook'em.com. You are the recruiting guru. A lot of players at today's game, official visits and unofficial visits. How does the outcome of today affect this recruiting class, if at all?
I think it's another good step for Coach Herman. As fans, as people who watch the game and report on the game, there are opportunities lost there, and maybe you look at it as a win that escapes through your fingers. As a Texas coach, you show that you're at home against the 10th ranked team in the nation. You're in overtime. Again, your losses, the last 3 have been double overtime to USC, 5 points to Oklahoma, now overtime to Oklahoma State. You can look at these recruits and go, hey, we're 1 or 2 big-time players away from winning these football games. And it can be a real statement. There are positions on this team that are up for grabs. You see true freshmen playing in 4 spots on the offense, and you can go to these wide receivers and to these quarterbacks and these offensive linemen and go, look, you come here in the spring or in the fall, and there are positions open at the University of Texas. And that's a big recruiting pitch. These kids want to get on the field as soon as possible because they want to get into the NFL as soon as possible. And so right now I think Texas is going to use this well as a recruiting pitch.
Well, Mike, I look at the schedule. Texas is 3-4 right now. Baylor next week. Shehan wants to talk about that in just a moment. At TCU, then you got Kansas, at West Virginia, then you have Texas Tech at home. So you got Baylor, Kansas, Texas Tech, all winnable football games. You go 6-6, you're going to go to a bowl game. Is that enough to keep the recruiting class together? If some of these kids are looking at wins and say, hey, I got to see winning before I'm going to make a commitment, are any of these kids, if they don't go to a bowl, you think going to jump off the ship? Is 6-6 enough to keep them on in a bowl game?
I would say it would be a bigger problem if Tom Herman's recruiting pitch was, we're out to win national championships this year. His recruiting pitch to this class has been, we're going to right this ship eventually, and you're going to be part of it. 6-6 is more proof of needing those guys to be a part of it. So his recruiting pitch isn't, hey, we're about to go 10-2 this year, come be a part of this, like maybe Alabama or other programs we're recruiting right now. His recruiting pitch is, look, at the University of Texas, we're a few points away in all these games, and you can be the difference in that. Whether that's true or not, that's how recruiting goes. It's like being a car salesman. But that is the recruiting pitch for Tom Herman, and I think when you watch these games as a recruit, you have to think that you have an opportunity to go play.
Yeah, and I think that you look at what Texas is doing now and what Texas was doing under Charlie Strong, and those are 2 very different things. These games are close, and obviously it sucks to lose close games, but every one of these games is coming down to the wire. It's one play here, it's one mistake here. And, that comes with experience, right? I mean, when Sam Ehlinger is a sophomore instead of a freshman or a junior instead of a sophomore, he makes the right play in that situation. And so I think that if you're a recruit looking in right now to the University of Texas, you just wanted to see improvement this year. I think that everybody's forgetting that Tom Herman took over a team that hadn't made a bowl game in 2 seasons, right? I mean, this is a rebuilding effort, not necessarily a race to the ground rebuilding effort, but it was an effort that needed to come in. They needed to bring in young players. They needed to bring in a new philosophy, new system. He needed to build his program from the ground up. And I know that everybody wanted to go and win 11 games this year and go to the national championship game, but that was never going to happen. And obviously, Since Maryland, I think that Texas has done what they're supposed to do at this point. I don't think that there's anything that you can look at as a negative at this point. Obviously, you want to come away with wins in those games, but you played number 10 Oklahoma State today. I don't think that there's any need to overreact to playing a close game and a great defensive game against Oklahoma State University.
Well, Doug Johnson says, and Doug, you're a great guy, I'm sure. I don't want to pick on you, but come on. Pound Warren up the middle and Texas wins the game. Really? What did you see that we didn't see? Pound him up the middle? What, for 3 yards, and then you kick the field goal and you go to a second overtime and hope? I think you had to try to win the game. I think Texas did try to win the game in overtime, and it was the right call. You can argue about the play calling. You got to try to win that game. They kicked the field goal. For goodness sake, it's all in your lap there. Try to win the football game. All right, Shahan, next week at Baylor.
Yep.
I'm interested to see which Texas team shows up, the one that has played the last 6 weeks with a whole lot of emotion, or is this Texas going to be flat after losing its second straight tough game in the final minutes?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, Texas better not come out flat in this next game, because obviously Baylor and Texas are a team that at least the past couple years have had the, it's been a little chippy. There's been a little bit of a, not necessarily a rivalry there, but at least it's gotten a little chippy between those two teams. And now Texas has an opportunity to not just go into Waco and pull off a win, but, really beat them into the ground. Because if if Baylor loses this week, they're 0-7. They're not playing for a bowl game anymore. If they have nothing to lose, right? So if Texas comes in flat, I mean, Baylor's going to treat that as their Super Bowl. And I think that Texas has to look at this game. They have to win this game to make a bowl game. I mean, it's as simple as that, because they have 2 more games against ranked opponents. And even if they can pull off a win in one of those, you just have to win a game like that in order to make a bowl game. And so I think that this is a big game next week for Texas to prove that, hey, we can beat the teams that we're supposed to beat on our schedule.
Mike, Texas, Baylor, noon start in Waco next Saturday. Your thoughts as you look ahead?
I just don't think a 3-4 team can sleepwalk against anybody. I mean, this isn't, the 5-1, 4-2 Texas football teams of past where they just run through people. They have to go win these football games. They're going to be plenty motivated after losing in overtime. I would imagine the quarterback's going to be plenty motivated after how they lost in overtime. So Texas has everything out in front of them, and the bowl game's not really important necessarily for recruiting or even prestige or anything. It gives Tom Herman extra practices with this team going into spring and stuff. And so getting to 6 wins is huge for this staff to get extra time with these younger guys and these younger players. And a Baylor game on the road is one that you should go win. You should be up for when you're 3-4 and come in. I mean, you're on a 2-game losing streak. You should be ready to win a football game.
Well, Robert Brown says 6-6 is Charlie Strong coaching. 6-6 is not what we signed up for, and I agree. It's not what you signed up for. But we didn't sign up for Connor Williams going down. We didn't sign up for Patrick Hudson going down. Elijah Rodriguez, 3 of your starting offensive linemen going down, and quite frankly, Zach Shackelford has been less than solid through the first 7 games of this season. It's interesting, Shahan. The record is Charlie Strong-like, but this team, with the emotion it's playing with defensively, of course, especially, it's anything but Charlie Strong-like.
Yeah, I mean, this Texas team can do one thing at an extremely high national level, and it might not necessarily show in the stats, especially because you're going against Big 12 competition. You've had to play USC, you've had to play Oklahoma, now you've played Oklahoma State, and obviously had a great game against them. But Texas's defense is performing at an exceptional level. It's up there with TCU, Iowa State, any of the other top defenses in the Big 12 right now. And they're stopping the run at such an incredibly high level. I mean, Justice Hill is one of the nation's best running backs, obviously one of the Big 12's best running backs, and they totally shut him down. He needed 33 carries to get to 100 yards, and I understand that he got to 100 yards, but they made things very difficult for him. And I think the secondary's coming along. They're making a lot of big-time plays. Offensively, again, it's a work in progress. They've lost a lot. I don't think that you can look at Charlie Strong's 5 or 6 wins and look at Tom Herman's 5 or 6 wins, because the difference between Charlie Strong winning 5 games in year 3 and Tom Herman winning 5 or 6 games in year 1, I don't think those are the same thing. Obviously they came in with talent, they came in with opportunity, but this is a new administration with a new system, and they have to teach the entire roster a whole bunch of new things. So it's just a little unfair to try and compare third-year Charlie Strong to first-year Tom Herman.
Well, Pete Olquin is the voice of reason. Pete, Appreciate this. Come on, folks. Realistically, this team is making strides, and of course, it would be awesome to win these games right now, but in my opinion, this is foundational work for the future. Herman is on the right track at this point. Now, if we still are doing this next year at this point, then criticize the coach, but right now, this is an improvement over the past 3 years. Mike, in a word, you agree, correct?
Yes, this is probably a 42-10 game 2 years ago. So, yeah, I think it showed a lot.
Shehan, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We're all on the same page. Look, folks, we got to go. Love to do this all day. Keep it right here on the Bevo Beat from Hook'em.com. For Mike Craven of Hook'em, appreciate it, Mike. Shehan Jeyarajah, diehards.com. I'm Bob Fossella. We will see you next week after the Baylor victory, the win over Baylor, I should say. I'm guaranteeing that right now. The win over Baylor. And I won't tell you where Shehan went to school. We're going to ignore that. But we'll see you next week right here. Until then, Hook'em.